Hi everyone, Teresa Aker here from Success Diaries with Teresa Aker. It's my privilege today to introduce you to Christine West. How you doing, Christine?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me, Teresa.
Oh, my pleasure. So I'm just going to read a little bit of your biography and then we're going to get to it. So
Sure.
Christine, absolutely. So Christine West is a powerhouse in emotional intelligence, human behavior, and communication. As a people strategist, she helps business owners break free from unconscious family dynamics that create limitations, communicate with clarity to get buy-in with their words, and set unshakable boundaries so they can build thriving businesses without guilt, inner conflict, or emotional exhaustion. With her training in psychological and kingdom principles and real world experience, Christine equips leaders, entrepreneurs, and sales professionals with the tools to navigate complex relationships, gain buy in, and elevate their impact and lead conversations easier. Well done, Christine. So I'm so glad you're here today.
Me too.
I
Thank
was
you.
doing, my pleasure. I'm doing a relationship series right now. And the reason I was doing that, I did have some viewers talk about they had relationship situations, and I had gone through some trauma myself. And so I had said I had to go through some healing, and I brought on
Yeah.
a counselor. And so now I'm doing a bit of a relationship series. And I was very grateful, Christine, that you were willing to come forward and talk to us about that. So let's get started. How did you get into this? What do you do? Let's go there.
Currently, in current times, most of my work really is about teaching folks how to communicate in different environments. So most of my clients, they get themselves into some complex dynamics with people, and sometimes it's a complex dynamic with themselves. So for example, the business owner that all of a sudden hires a bunch of folks and can't get them motivated, or has a bunch of people who don't want to buy into their words, or the person who gets themselves in messy, sticky situations that the workplace is toxic and they don't know how to explain it. My work has been where some of the greatest folks is seeing that leader that seems, hey, you know what, I got it going on. And then they realize that they have somebody who's very toxic in the workplace and they use traditional methods, that they don't realize that they're getting sucked into the toxicity or set up to be the person set up to get fired. Or yeah, my range of work is really helping folks to understand their patterns, understand how they're showing up. And sometimes we get so used to hey, you know what, I grew up in a maybe in a dysfunctional dynamic, and I feel really safe in this, so I go to work and I act that out.
Oh, that's interesting. So someone who has a bit of a background draws in that kind of workplace too, because that's what they're familiar with. Although they may not like it, it's actually a comfort zone for them. Would that make sense?
Yeah, so a lot of my work is really about when that emotional intelligence or that awareness that if you're a person, a business owner, an entrepreneur out there, for example, that everybody wants to have a thriving business, okay, consciously. But yet, subconsciously, your familiarity may be, okay, this is how I handle conflict in a toxic manner, passive aggressive. It may be things that are very unhealthy.
Right.
So I'm a resource that helps folks, business owners, entrepreneurs, and those leaders. How are you leading those conversations? How are you showing up? Are you showing up in a way that is beneficial to the goals? Or are you unknowingly, subconsciously pushing away really good people?
Oh, I get what you're doing now. And I did understand a bit of it before, but now you've really clarified it. So now you have a leader in an organization who has a specific personality trait, who, although they have good intentions, they're using those traits subconsciously. It's driving people away or pushing their motivation in the wrong direction. Does that sound right?
Yeah, for example, here's an example that I've dealt with multiple times.
Sure.
Is a leader that says that I get into a conversation with, who eventually becomes my client, says, hey, you know what? I need some type of communication training. because most people just see it as a communication problem. And I ask a few questions, what's really going on here? And they say something such as, I have a team and we have this one person who has a strong personality. And the strong personality doesn't really mesh well with the rest of the team, and the rest of the team is in the bathroom crying. Is
Oh,
it? And I've talked to that strong personality person about how they're showing up, and it just seems like nothing's changing. But that strong personality person gets all the work done. And what they don't realize, and then as I dig deeper into the conversation about what that leader really needs, is unknowingly that they're dealing with somebody who is very toxic, somebody who is potentially very narcissistic, somebody that is looking at things from a perspective that says, you know what, I'm really into what I want in the workplace. I'm not concerned if people are crying or how I'm showing up.
oh, and I've met people like that at workplaces. Absolutely, where they're almost obnoxious, but they do a really good job. So you're like, okay, they're driving us all nuts, but they're doing top sales, right?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
kind of person. I know who you mean. I know that person.
Yeah, but then all of a sudden, what happens is that they're beyond just obnoxious. They're already gathering data about maybe that leader to, if they're a subordinate to say, let's just speak about sales, okay? If it's a top salesperson, and usually the company says, yeah, but you're feeding us. And it doesn't really matter that you have all these other quirky behaviors. But at the same time, it's something but at the same time, that leader really is not leading. The
Right.
leader is really trying to understand, I've talked about these obnoxious behaviors, or I've talked about this or that, but really that person is setting the leader up for something that's not so pleasant for the leader, and the leader doesn't even
Right.
see it.
And I can understand that because the leader, absolutely. And they also have to be careful because companies have their own set of rules and regulations that they have to follow as a leader, be sensitive to the rest of the employees. So they're very careful to try to balance out everything. And if you have one that's really out there, that could become a real issue for the leader. So how do you bring that together? How does one see the problem and then how do you bring it together? Can you give us some hints on that?
Sure. Part of okay, so some of the challenges is everybody normalizes whatever their normal is.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So whatever your normal
Yeah.
so if your normal is, if I'm a leader of a team, and if I normalize that, here's this person who is obnoxious, but they're bringing in sales, and then the rest of the group feels beat up, feels ignored. They're maybe at first I'm thinking they're all too sensitive type
Yeah,
things,
exactly.
maybe something like that. So it's really understanding and asking, is this normal? Is this really? Because sometimes at a subconscious level, what we're experiencing as adults in the workplace, maybe there's something that's how you grew up. Maybe that's how a household was in a family. But anyways, how do you realize that it's more about, if everybody else is beat up, is that really healthy?
No.
No. Okay. So as a leader, and it's also recognizing what are your limitations and what are your strengths, because here's a bad habit of many people. And they think they're doing good. And I get why people think they're doing it. It's a phrase that says, but I told them to stop it. If you told somebody who's toxic to stop it, is saying to somebody, hey, I'm a top salesperson,
Yeah.
and now you're telling me to knock it off. What you're telling me is, if I'm a toxic person, that, oh, I have more power over you because now I've irritated everything.
Oh, and so they're looking for the drama of the situation.
Yeah. So
Oh,
if I'm a toxic person, that I know that you need me to feed you, and
oh,
now you're telling me to knock it off, who's really in charge?
Okay. And if you don't knock it off, then now you're the one with the problem, not me. Like, in other
Yeah.
words, if the person who's toxic just says, I'm in control, either I'm going to follow your rules or I'm going to do what I want, you're really in control, right?
Yeah. So the thing is that the toxic person that's more on that narcissistic scale, and let's
Right.
just term certain things because I'm not diagnosing anybody. That toxic person could be narcissistic. They can have maybe they're emotionally immature. Maybe they are somebody who's an emotional avoidant. It doesn't matter what they are, they're just showing up toxic. Okay. We'll just say that.
Oh, sure.
So part of what it is, if I'm toxic, I'm with that drama that's being created. It's something that from a leader that it's more what I'm going to do is what I'm going to do is say something like, hey, Teresa, well, tell me more why it bothers you. Because I'm not gonna submit to you. I'm gonna start data gathering.
Oh, and find out what other buttons I can push.
Yeah, but I'm not going to do it where I'm not going to sit here and say to you, let's find out what are buttons. I'm going to start being your pal.
Oh, so now, okay, so what you're telling me, if I'm hearing this right,
Yeah.
sounds, and we're throwing this word narcissism around a lot, I think, today, but
Yeah.
to me, it sounds like it's a bit of that kind of a dynamic. It's a narcissist who collects data to get information so that they can use what they need in the relationship. Does that sound right?
Correct. So it's something that, okay, these types of dynamics is, okay, so if I'm a business owner, of
Yeah.
which I am, okay,
Yes.
and if I hire an assistant that is narcissistic, what's going to probably happen is that this person's going to seem like a godsend at first. But it's also because of where I may be at, and I'm not saying I am at this place, just to disclose, is that for the business owner who all of a sudden is, I'm a little vulnerable. So let's say a VA. So a VA can be into all your appointments, your emails, your response, your sales, your products, your services, and and if you blur boundaries as a business owner or a leader, that where if the person is narcissistic, if they are narcissistic or toxic or have some type of those traits, what's going to happen is they're going to build dependence. They're going to seem like a godsend without really helping you. So it's like this. It's almost as though you are blindsided and thinking, oh, they're taking care of this, they're taking care of this, but they're really not taking care of it. So it could look like this, that, okay, it's a
I'm
lot
getting it. I'm
almost,
getting it, Christine.
okay, you getting it? It's
Yeah.
almost as though, okay, you hire this person and oh my God, you painted a picture that you're God sent, but you're getting into my needs and everything about my business. And I could tell you an example. This when I first started my business 20 something years ago, I had an example like this.
Okay.
That I hired somebody to do sales for me. And it was where, because I was a newer entrepreneur, I was in a space where I wasn't as polished, I wasn't as aware. And what started happening is I'm opening up to him and I'm telling him all these different things and blah, blah, blah about needs and thinking that, oh, I'm really being vulnerable here and I'm being open. But what he was doing was, as he was doing outside sales for me, what he was doing was he was gathering data and reporting to me about this, that, and the other. And then what happened was the public started telling me, so and how they're representing you is not, we really like you, but how the things he's doing is not, doesn't really fit with us because it's
Oh,
not how you're showing up.
so
And
stop there, Christine. So he's out there representing your company. He's collected data on you. You're dependent on those sales now,
Yeah, I'm dependent. Yeah.
and you need those sales, but the customer is not comfortable.
Yeah.
And
So thank
so what's
God.
the purpose? Oh, hold on, I'm almost
Yeah.
there. What's
Yeah.
the purpose of the person who now you're dependent on? What's the purpose from their direction?
From his direction, what he was trying to accomplish, which he didn't accomplish, was he wanted to be me. He
Oh,
wanted
so he
he
definitely,
he
oh,
wanted an equity position. He wanted partnership. He
so he's
wanted,
using your clients, your company, representing himself as himself, but really with your cloak over top so that
yeah,
he could actually eventually take over the company.
yes.
I got it. I get the
Yeah,
mark,
yeah,
right?
yeah. So how does this happen? Okay.
Yes.
It
How did this happen?
happened. How does this happen? And just using this as a real life example of something that happened 20 something years ago, is it happens because one, I didn't know what to look for. I was being very trusting, I was being very open, I was being very transparent
Sure.
about which seems very good traits. But I also, at that time in my life, I had blurred boundaries. I was oversharing. I was,
Why were you oversharing?
as a newer entrepreneur and being very new to being a business owner, it was where I was trusting. Why I was doing it was because of bad habits that at one time in my life, being raised as, I didn't realize back then I was being a people pleaser.
So
I
it
back,
is your personality that actually drew you to this person in your life.
yes,
Is that right?
yeah, yeah.
See, there, I got that too.
Let me take it further. It wasn't, okay. It wasn't exactly my personality, part of my personality. It was my nervous system that was used to this type of dynamic.
Okay.
Okay. So, based on when we grow up, and this is something that it's examining what patterns did we grow up in? If you had blur boundaries, if you got where as a people pleaser back then, I'm not today, but back then, as somebody who was behaving that way, it was, wow, I'm here to please my employee because they're doing all these great things. I was visualizing, I'm creating something, this dynamic that he has his role and I'm doing everything right. But how did this happen? But because there were clients that really loved my brand and loved me. They were open enough. But here's the thing, what happened is that once I was awake to it, and it was, okay, I'm not, he was trying to create that dependence. That's what they do, is if you're toxic, you're creating a dependence. And so for his point of view, it was, let's chip away at creating a dependence that Christine needs me.
And he's empowered because now really he is in control because you do need those sales.
Yeah, that's where he made the mistake, because as soon as somebody like me was awakened to
Right.
it and realizing that I'm not going to have this. So in my case, what flipped the switch was protecting my own company and doing things that to get rid of him, but do it in a smart way.
So now, but now you have to do it from your angle. And was it simple to release that relationship?
For me, it was.
Good.
It was, but not, that doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah, because
Most,
I would think the person who now has got themselves in that position, it may not be as easy to break that situation.
yes, in my particular case, and
Sure.
this is now, this goes into my personality, is okay, even though back then I was running a lot of the people pleasing type patterns, then it flipped the switch of, because I grew up in Chicago, and it was more the switch of, I'm going to kick your ass.
Yeah, yeah, you would change. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, yeah, it
And
was like,
that's
oh,
what you need to do, Christine. You have to change the perception and say,
yeah,
okay, Now I'm coming from this perspective. Originally, I was the person who was a bit more needy. Now I'm in charge and I'm saying, no, these are the boundaries. This is what I'm doing. And it doesn't suit my purpose. So I'm taking the offense instead of the defense.
You do, but here's the thing that I'm going to talk a little bit about, because a lot of people, your listeners, may sit there and say, okay, fine and dandy that I'm not there. Okay.
Right.
In a lot of cases, what happens is that business owner or that leader gets so dependent on being fed. The mistakes of this person in my example was that I had to flip the switch of saying, I don't need him. He's using my brand. He's
Right.
using me. He's
Right.
using who I am. He needs me. And as soon as I fired him, it, his he was pretty nasty.
And people could be that way, can't they?
Oh yeah, I remember when I fired him, but before I invited him to lunch, and I literally said to him, even before my way to lunch, I cut off his email, redirected so he had no access to any systems, any sources. And then I sat down and I already had things in writing, handed it to him. He read it and he looked at me. And the lunch table, we were in a public place. I remember him picking up the table and pushing it over on me.
Oh my goodness. So now he's really angry
Oh, yeah.
because now you've taken away his power.
Yeah. Yeah.
I get that. And is
Yeah.
that kind of the same across the board for relationships in business and in romance and in family situations where you're dealing with that personality? Is it usually the same pattern?
Yeah, there's a lot of similar patterns. So, for example, let's just, when it goes into, okay, a lot of people, and I really want to help people to discern,
Okay.
because I do believe in interdependence, but I don't believe in anybody needs to be so dependent on anyone. So, I'm speaking business or a family unit or a romance. So think about this. If for those who are married or those who are in the dating realm, if you're in a place where you become so dependent on someone, and if they are of that type of nature, of that toxic nature, you get, especially women, get stuck because, and I've heard this from women, I'll stick around because it ain't so bad. He pays my bills. The kids are going to be young adults. I don't want to disturb things. He's just emotionally abusive. And what I'm speaking about is everything that I'm speaking about is emotional abuse, mental abuse. It's not, even though in my example of business where I'm saying an employee that when he got angry, he pushed the table over on me because it was checkmate.
But
It
that's abuse.
That was abuse. But see, part of it is because once these toxic people, once you see their real identity, it's game over.
Yeah, exactly. And they're
It's
frustrated
game,
because they can't
they're
go anywhere.
frustrated. So anyways, it was, but these patterns, whether they're business, friendship, the real tall tale sign is, does somebody want the best for you, or does somebody want you to have dependence on them for everything?
And so now you have to decide, are you strong enough to say, no, I'm going to take care of myself? Although I could use some assistance, I don't want to be dependent on anyone because we all can use assistance, but that doesn't mean we necessarily have to be dependent.
Correct. So, for example, okay, let's have some subtle examples. That the person who, and I'm going to speak of workplaces, okay, if they say something like, my boss, my workplace is really toxic. We hear these things, okay?
Sure.
Okay, the workplace is toxic. Okay, then I would say something such as, well, then why are you sticking around?
That would be my next question. Then why aren't you looking for another job?
Okay, so if it's so toxic, what are you getting out of it?
Because you're settling, right?
Yes and no. You could view it as that you're settling, but here's the thing is, what human beings, we participate in what's familiar. consciously we may be saying this is toxic, but at the subconscious level, there may be something in our subconscious that's sitting there saying, this is so familiar to me that I'm digging this. So let's take it from the perspective of why do women, like you hear this all the time, a battered woman, what? Okay, she got out of the battered relationship. Why is she in another one? Because it's so familiar. So why do people job hop to one toxic workplace to a next toxic workplace?
Because
It's
they're getting
familiar.
something out of it, right, Christine?
It's familiar. It's
Yeah.
familiar. Our subconscious mind is meant to keep us safe. It doesn't say that this is healthy.
Okay, and familiarity to the brain is safe because I know what's
Yes.
coming next.
Yes. So if I know what's coming next, that you're going to jerk me around and it's going to be passive aggressive, it's going to be jerk my emotions around, even though I consciously may say, I don't like this.
Yeah.
But see, think about it from if I'm in a workplace and all of a sudden, all of us employees are sitting there, oh, we're having a good time. And then it's like the boss is coming because you know that's not permitted, having a good time because he's going to be barking. That's a pattern.
Sure it is.
We shut up because the boss is here.
But the
How,
trade-off to these people is they get to work in an environment where they like each other and or whatever they're getting out of it.
whatever is familiar. So for example,
Right.
how many workplaces, the most toxic workplaces want dependence and control? Okay, think about a workplace that says boss comes up to, and it doesn't really matter who you are. It's time to take your break.
You're right. They're telling you when. I get
They're
that.
telling you when. It's time for you to eat.
Right.
It's time that they don't even like when, let's just say, because this happens in work a lot, in everybody's work, something is taking longer than needed, or they need you. Do they come and say to you something a toxic workplace wouldn't say to you, hey, can you stay a little bit longer? They would just say, hey, you need to stay and finish this,
Right.
if they created the problem. Okay, so they're training you and conditioning you that you don't have a choice.
Correct. Correct. And
And
and we are conditioned as a society to follow authority. We are conditioned to
yes,
follow rules, and that's what is respectful. So then you're right, we follow that, and even if it's a toxic leader, it is what it
yes,
is. We have to follow the rules because that's what we're conditioned to do from childhood even. So exactly. So to break free from that, you really either have to recalibrate yourself and say, okay, this is not acceptable to me. You may have to move companies, you may have to go to a different department, but you also have to be aware going into the next one, you're not following the same pattern.
I would even say, let me take it even deeper.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. Change in environment, whether the change is new company environment, new business. If you're an entrepreneur business owner, I'm changing, who I
Sure.
hire, or I'm changing whatever. Environment is temporary change.
Sure.
Yeah, it's temporary. Okay. And what happens is that, because think about job hoppers. Why is it that you can start excited, you go into the workplace, and then you start doing your thing, and then the trigger happens that the same thing happens? Like now it's toxic.
And
You're
now you think,
excited, but
why did I bother?
why did I bother? Why did, it's the same old whatever. Okay. So if it was true, just changing environments is the solution, it's not. Oh, your camera.
Yeah.
But anyways, continuing, is that also what it has to happen with someone is really about changing it's an inside job of really changing our identity, in the sense of bringing out asking the question, why am I so comfortable in these situations? Why is this so familiar? It's identifying the identity who participates in that. So let me simplify it. If I grew up in a family where say one parent was a great orchestrator of separation and passive aggressiveness and telling stories. And so in the traditional narcissistic model, love bombing, then let's gaslight and let's jerk you around with the hoovering. And then when I don't need you anymore, the great disposal of you. Okay. So
Wow, yeah.
if that's something, sometimes what happens is that when many of us grew up in situations of emotional immaturity, grew up where, okay, if you have emotionally immature parents, nobody reflected back to you how you feel. It's all about that parent. Codependency stems from that, where we're coming to the rescue of somebody, we're enabling bad behaviors. Okay, if we are in those models and used to these types of things and the people pleasing, or we're taught as young people to put ourselves last, we are prey. Doesn't matter how intellectual you are. So it's about healing those things within our identity, that realizing that if we are, an identity shift is bringing out a better version of us.
And that's what you do, Christine, for people.
Yeah, yeah.
Beautiful.
So it's something that if I'm going to show you your patterns through emotional intelligence, and I'm showing you how you're communicating to yourself, and I'm showing you how you are showing up in that workplace as a leader. Why are you allowing toxic people to walk all over you? Why are you a business owner that you hired a bunch of people and then you ask them to do something and they're like, I don't feel like doing it. Then you end up doing it and you hand them a paycheck. Where do I sign up for that?
Yeah, exactly. I want that job too.
I want that job. But that happens. That
Beautiful.
happens more than you realize.
I can understand that completely, Christine. And thank you for your leadership abilities and doing what you do. Now, I see in behind you have quite a background there. Do you do courses or do you go into
Yeah.
companies? What do you do?
Yeah, I do. I really am focused these days on business owners and
Okay.
entrepreneurs. And because they're the ones who want to pivot, they're the ones who want to change, create healthier cultures. So a lot of my work, so for example, I have an upcoming workshop that I've done before, and it's called You're Doing Everything Right, except for Why Are You Still Stuck? And
Okay.
it's really about identifying the subconscious patterns that we've learned from our families of that aren't really playing out for us, and those generational patterns that are playing out for our income ceiling, our behaviors of how we want to show up. If you came from family members, for example, that were never a entrepreneur, and let's say if you're acting out like how your grandmother or your mom, who was never an entrepreneur, and you have hesitation patterns, for example. Here's just an example of, or you're trying to sell something and you come from the subconscious belief that you're not worthy because somewhere along the lines that you were told over and over as a child that, you're not worthy of that.
So you're able to go into these companies, you probably do it online, right? Yeah, so you help with the companies with their organizations.
Yeah,
So I have another question for you,
yeah,
Kristen, because
yeah,
we've had an amazing day today. I
yeah.
wondered if you would come back and do another episode with me.
Sure, I'd be happy to.
We have so much more to cover, and I find it fascinating, and you're doing such an eloquent job of explaining and how you do it. So the next one, we could come back and reintroduce this and go further in depth. Would that be all right with you?
Perfect, perfect. Let's do
Thank
it.
you. I appreciate that. Now, also, I'm going to have all your information on here. Do you have a web page that you can give us right now?
It's being updated, but by the time this is published, you can go to thebusinessmd.net. But
Okay,
I'm also going to give you, hold on one second. I'm going to also, for my upcoming workshop, which is on March, or not March, we're in May 15th. And it really for entrepreneurs and I'll make sure you have that link to,
perfect. I'll
give you
make sure it's
okay.
all in the show notes for you, Christine.
Yeah, the show notes, because it's something that when I last did, you're doing everything right, but why are you still stuck?
Yeah.
It was pretty enlightening to the business owners and entrepreneurs that attended how much we all have in common, and those who are ready to take another step for themselves to say, I don't want to participate in these patterns anymore, move
Yeah.
forward with me.
And
Um,
you can help the leaders and the companies drive forward and have better relationships, right?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, indeed. It's something that I would share. Many people, leave your listeners with this. When it comes to relationships, a relationship is fluid. It's mutually satisfaction going on. Somehow we've gone into these old paradigms of this mindset that says, I'm boss, I tell you what to do.
Right.
From my perspective, I'm not a boss. I'm a leader. I guide people. Most people do better if they're guided. But if you're so conditioned somebody telling you what to do that you don't know how to think for yourself, then the problem with that is you can't expect that type of person to be a top performer because they're waiting for
Right.
somebody to tell them what to do.
And they can't think outside the box. They can't be creative. They're stifled in their forward thinking. So I can
Yeah,
understand that.
yeah. So a lot of toxic things happen. So if you're, it may be in a more insecure leader that says, "Cool, I'm the boss. I'm telling him what to do," and then you never ask for input from your front line or what's going on with the customers, and then all of a sudden, customers
Are
start not
not
paying
happy.
or they're not happy or whatever it may be. And then all of a sudden you take input for your customer and then you start barking at these employees that you were the ones that told them what to do and they followed your orders. That's a dangerous loop
Sure it is. Sure it is.
because it's something that, once again, you created the dependence, and now that's how the toxic cycle is. I'm not going to take responsibility. I told you what to do, but I don't allow you to question me, but therefore it's your fault.
I get that. I
That's
get
the
that.
gaslighting.
Wow. That's incredible. Christine, you're amazing. So from here, I want to be able to, I'm going to have all your information on the show notes. I definitely want you to come back. You've done an
Definitely.
amazing job today. I am so grateful you came on. And honestly, it was my pleasure, Christine. To everyone, this is Christine West. I'm going to have all her information. Do go over to all her social media and to her webpage, get her information, and definitely you're going to want to talk to her about her program. From there, this is Teresa Aker from Success Diaries with Teresa Aker. I do hope you're having a great day. Please subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate that. I hope you're having a great day and I look forward to talking to you all very soon. Bye-bye now.